Hey, what's up people? Today I want to talk about the Boker Arbolito El Gigante. I already did a video about this knife more than a year ago now, and I felt, now is the time to do basically like a full review, I guess, about this thing. First I show you how this knife came to me out of the box. I would say it had like a rough shaving sharpness, and the edge was a little bit asymmetrical though, I have to say that, but it still was fairly sharp. And as you can see here, it has a couple of problems cutting like thin newspaper, but this is a giant Bowie knife, so who cares. Had a crack in the leather sheath on the front though. Not too nice to see that, but more about the leather sheath later on. First we'll talk about some other imperfections that it had out of box. A couple of scratches here on the spine, as you can see now, and also down underneath on the ricasso. But that is not a big deal because, I use the knife like this, and, I don't care about a couple of scratches. Size comparison time. Ontario Red 1, as you just saw, and Spyderco PM2. We get to fixed blade size comparison in a second. Blade length on this guy is 23.5 centimeters. Here's a classic Buck 110. So the blade length is 9 inches. 37 centimeters overall, which is 14.5 inches. That was a Mora companion, and here's a USMC K-bar from K-bar, basically. Weight is 476 grams, so 16.7 ounces. Here's a Canadian Camp 2 from Bug River. The blade thickness is about 6 millimeters, tapers very quickly towards the front. Blade shape is very beautiful with that nice and subtle recurve. And what that recurve does, it basically, helps you drag material into the edge, and then it pushes the material over this belly in the front and ends the cut in a nice precise tip. And the tip is supported by a long swedge on the top. Here's a close-up of that tip. I wouldn't say it's flimsy, but it's definitely on the thinner side. The blade tapers very quickly, halfway through the blade, and tapers to that point really fast. So it's not overly thick, and you can see it's nice and balanced, relatively fast in hand. The balance point is right here on the ricasso, and so it's not as front heavy as you may think it is. So that means it's not as choppy as you may imagine a big knife like this to be. Also, the handle is not set up really for the gripping it further back and doing some more chopping, but you can, for example, choke up on the ricasso here, get your thumb on the front and get some finer slicing going. Here, show you a close-up of the handle. Has a nice pommel on the front. The handle material in this case is micarta, so green micarta. And this is the good micarta. This is not the bad micarta that you see sometimes. This is the good stuff for sure. The handle tapers very quickly. Both the blade, actually, the blade tang and the handle taper towards the end. So there is not a lot to hold you on there. Also no lanyard hole. The only thing that holds you on there basically is that intense grooving. That's, I think Boker says, it's like made to mimic the horns of an antelope. It looks very beautiful for sure. But there is not a lot of, room back there to hold your hand on that handle, while chopping. You do have a nice portion for a pinch grip though. The entire blade is made in Argentina by Boker Arbolito, one of the brands that belongs to Boker. You can remove the scales with a screwdriver, and you also need something to lift up the scales. At least on mine, there was a little bit of glue underneath the scales, so. But it's nice. It's a nice feature for sure that you can remove them. The screws go into these brass tubes, and there is no milling out underneath these scales, but the knife really doesn't need it. Also, you can remove that stainless steel guard if you want to. Yeah, but you have to get the tubes out first, which is a little bit of a pain, I guess, but it's possible. Let's dive right into use. As you can see, this knife chops fairly well. Despite I said before, it's not, set up for chopping that good, but what I found is that it chops really well when it comes to like the the more softer woods, so the more softer vegetation that grows alongside riverbanks and stuff like that. Though for those kinds of woods it's really good, but you know, once you move up in elevation and the wood gets harder and you know there's more resin in the wood, it gets a little bit more difficult, a little bit more tricky. But so I personally, for me, I found that this knife, I can use it the best, you know, in areas where the vegetation is not too dense, and I don't know, the wood is just a little bit on the softer side. Here you can see me processing some small sticks, and you know, as you can see, it does fairly well, which at this size, you know, and weight, it should for sure. You can see me in some of these shots, you know, not swinging the knife with full energy. And the reason for that is, you know, especially if you're in the woods for multiple days, you need to, you know, kind of be a little bit more careful with how much energy you use for each task, because you need that for the things, for example, for your hike back and to the trail and stuff like that. So I do not, obviously you could chop faster with this knife, but it's not always necessary. Here we can see some of the winter use that I had with this blade. This is not very hard wood in this case, but it was definitely frozen on the surface, so it did fairly well for considering that. I always bring a folding saw on all of my camping trips, basically. In this case, this is my silky saw, my trusted companion for every camping trip that I had in the last couple of years. It just helps you to process wood much quicker. As you can see, I do not use, you know, overly large piece of baton here. It's fairly reasonable for the size of the blade. And again, this is not the hardest wood, but it was definitely very cold, and the wood was a little bit frozen on the surface, so it did fairly well for considering all that. Because I was interested, I compared this knife to my Boker River Canadian Camp 2, which is 8mm thick, and it's, you know, thick all the way to the front. Also has a different handle. The handle is a little bit more set up for the chopping task, so it's thicker. Also the grind is a convex in this case, and it has a broad shoulder, which the Arbolito is not. It has it's a full flat grind all the way to the spine, so it's thinner in the geometry basically. And the Canadian Camp is more hefty. But I still wanted to see, you know, how these two blades would compare to each other, because they're in the same size and weight class. And the Canadian Camp is a beast when it comes to things. In this case, we baton very, you know, a wood that is very easy to baton, just to see. But the Canadian Camp did it a little bit more easy. And then we moved up to some really nasty stuff. This is well seasoned, and it's very difficult to process usually. But as you can see, the Canadian Camp eats through that piece of log, like butter. I mean, it's nothing for this blade. But in comparison with the El Gigante, I mean, that full flat grind is probably the reason the entire geometry here, that this blade tends to get stuck while batoning sometimes. Obviously, you could argue that that piece of wood has a little bit, you know, maybe has a knot more inside than the one we batoned just before, but I found that to be true, you know, more often. So basically what happens here, I get stuck, and at the end I do not even get the knife out, and you can see I'm shaking my hand because it really hurts at this point. We'll speed up the footage here. So the knife was stuck in there and I couldn't get it out. So I decided I will just smash it through until eventually it works. And it did in the end. But it was a lot of pain to get through this. So yeah, the Arbolito El Gigante is definitely not my favorite batoning knife, for sure. It's not perfect for that task. Especially when it comes to more harder woods. Softer woods, and like I said, it does it fairly good, but you can see I batoned the half piece that we just got out of the larger one, and that was all right. And then the other half also was okay. And here is it again, next to the Canadian camp. Much easier with the Canadian camp and the profile it has. So I went on and only batoned like smaller pieces. As you can see, those worked a little bit better. But in this case, we have well-seasoned cherry wood, and that one was also very gnarly to get through. As you will see, I also got the blade stuck in here, so the whole full flat grind tends to get stuck sometimes in wood. You have to consider that when you plan to use it for an outdoors blade. So I went ahead and chopped down the wood we just tried to baton through with an axe, and then used half of it, and that one worked, but it was also not very easy. But what about the more finer stuff? So in this case, I'm feather sticking, and the whole, the sharpness is still. This shot was basically taken before we batoned and we chopped with this blade. As you can see, it was not doing too well, but it was alright. In this case, for example, in one of my winter adventures, I did the feather stick and with this blade, and it did quite good. As you can see here, you will for sure get a fire going if you want to, but it's not the whole, the flat asymmetrical edge is not perfect for feather sticking. It's not comparable to like a convex grind form, like I said, Bug River or Moor or something, Falcon even. Not comparable to something like this, but yeah. What the knife did really excel at though is when you grabbed it with two hands, and if you use it like a drawing knife, basically, drawing it towards your body, and for example, if you debark a tree or something like this, or want to get some wood shavings even done for, this blade did so well that you can hear the church bells in the next town started ringing because it was doing so well. I'm just kidding. And then my camera fell off the tree stump. But yeah, it was really easy to get shavings going with this. So that long blade and the non-sharpened swedge really helps you grab that knife with two hands. And yeah, I do like to use my larger blades in a motion like this. It works usually quite well. And as you can see, I'm re-stropping that edge on wood multiple times in this video already. Works fairly well because the the edge can be re-stropped quite easily. It's definitely with the N695 steel that we have on here, the edge favors rolling rather than chipping, for sure. You can also see it took quite a good edge when resharpening this, and it was always very easy to bring an edge back on there. Not a big deal, but at the same time the edge was lasting for like, on a camping trip of 2 days, the edge was definitely lasting for that amount of time. But if you go into like 3 days, or if you start skinning some animals, then you will definitely have to resharpen it. more often. But yeah, I use my workshop to resharpen this blade, which I normally don't do. I don't like the workshop too much, but for the El Gigante it worked quite well, and this N695 took a fine edge on this on the sharpening system. It was not a big deal at all. As you can see, it took a fine edge and sliced through the paper quite good. So yeah, quite easy to restore that edge, for sure. If you want to know more about the N695, it's basically like N690, just a more simpler version. Although it has more carbon, it has 1.20% carbon. It has a little bit more carbon basically than N695, but it doesn't have more edge retention, at least not with the heat treatment and geometry we see here. Quite a high amount of chromium also in the steel, 18% chromium, so it's not a steel that will rust on you easily, and especially with that stone wash that is on the blade. But it is a more simplified version in my mind than N690, and also in my experiences with this blade, it performs, at least with the heat treatment that's on there, performs a little bit less good than N690 and 440C and stuff like that. But you know, for an outdoor steel, it works quite well, especially for stainless, which was one of the reasons that I was interested in this knife, to have a stainless steel also in my collection for outdoor use. So yeah, the steel did just fine for the needs that I have when I'm, you know, in the woods and processing wood and getting fires going and building camps. Let's talk about the sheath now. The sheath has a nice loop on the top, and it goes over the top guard, so you don't cut it when drawing the knife. The stitching is done nice. The carrying system on the sheath is also really nice. You have a dangler that moves around, so basically you can draw the knife upwards, or you can draw it to the side or to the front, depending how you like it. So this basically helps when you do have a jacket on, so you can turn the whole sheath and you do not end up slicing your jacket or your poncho or whatever you're wearing. I do like the dangler quite a bit. I often carried this knife like so, and it worked quite well. So yeah, the design on the sheath is really impressive. I do really enjoy it. It's a well thought through sheath for sure. If you do not like a dangler system, then you can also, you know, put your belt through the loop up here and carry it a little bit higher basically, but at the same time you lose the ability to turn it as far to the front or to the rear, so you basically only can draw it upwards, which can be a little bit annoying, especially with more gear. I personally sometimes throw also you know, an AR sling basically on my larger fixed blades sheaths, and that allows me to carry the whole knife underneath, you know, my clothing, so it's a little bit easier to move around. I would not carry this blade upside down if I was you, because that loop that holds the blade in sometimes comes loose and the blade can fall out, which is not something you want. But if you carry it like this, and for example, I personally also throw my folding saw on that gunsling, and so I carry both my knife and my saw on there as long as I'm, you know, working around camp and things like that. It's a little bit more easy to, you know, than to carry everything on your belt. Sometimes it's easier to carry, and it's easier to, you know, especially if you have more clothing on. But in some cases I actually also threw this knife just on my backpack. It worked also. I can actually, from this position, I can actually draw the knife from my backpack, which I don't, you know, intend to, but it does work. Yeah, sometimes I was too lazy to carry it on my belt, so I just did it like this, and it worked also. But you can also leave the dangler on your belt and then just, you know, detach the sheath whenever you need it, and, you know, yeah. But the sheath overall, the quality of the sheath is really bad. I do not even think this is real leather, so in comparison to a leather sheath the same size, it's only half the weight, so which is a good thing potentially, but the sheath quality is not I'm not crazy about this. Yeah, overall the Boker Arbolito El Gigante is a really nice knife. It comes in at about 170 to 200 euros right now. Multiple versions of this. You know, it's arguably that for that amount of money you can, you know, for example, get a SE Glass with a nice Kydex sheath, or like a Boker BK9, and you know, you have some money left and invest that in a good Kydex sheath and maybe a new handle. But the Arbolito as it comes, I don't know, it's not for the money you pay, it's definitely not the perfect outdoors Bowie knife, for sure. And it's definitely not in general the perfect outdoors, you know, large fixed blade, but I do like it. I'm actually quite happy that I did take my time and did not do a review right away, you know, when I received it after a couple of weeks, because I would have given it a lot worse review than I do now. I do think the quality of the sheath is not good, but the overall knife is, I do like it, and now I do know how I use it, and you know, as long as I'm not chopping wood that's too hard and there's too much resin in it, it's perfectly fine. And I'm actually, this knife actually grew on me, and I probably will keep it around for a while now. Yeah, that's it.